Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's 8:30, March 16th. I call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, Cindy.
Ed Schachner.
Present.
Sean Anderson. Present. Bob Long.
Present.
Kathy Leaf.
Present.
Kara Cook. Present. Tim Hall.
Present.
Paul Burning.
Present.
Rick Otino.
Present.
Bob Fiedler. Dave Osnes.
Present.
Scott Coner.
Present.
Dan Hansen.
Yo.
Scotty Ard.
Present.
Greg Telejohn.
Present.
David Peterson.
Here.
Paulette Anderson.
Present.
Judy Achterhoff. Bill Peavy.
Present.
18.
All right, next item is the approval of minutes from Monday, October 11th. Everybody's had a chance to read those ahead of time. Is there any additions or corrections? Seeing no additions or corrections, they will stand approved. Public comment. Is there anybody here from the public that wishes to make a comment for items on or off the agenda? Is there anybody here from the public that wishes to make a comment? And third and last time, is there anybody here from the public that wishes to make a comment? Seeing none, we'll move right on to the budget business items. First one is review of the 2023 department budget forecast. I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Witt, and he's going to start us down the process. The goal is to be done by 11, because the selection committee for new county clerk is going to meet shortly after that. So hopefully we can roll right along. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Peavy. With the Ashley got back from honeymoon, she brought back Costa Rica coffee, so I'll probably be talking really fast this morning. Some strong stuff. So the directions that I gave the department heads, just so you know what to expect when they come up, I asked them to talk about changes from their current budget to the 2023 budget, what they're projecting to see changed. So they don't need to go into their current work activities, how they currently are spending their money. We're only looking for that delta, that difference that they're projecting for 2023. And I think you're going to see three main categories of that, and you can kind of watch for that. One is going to be inflationary pressures. Fuel costs are up. So if the sheriff department says, well, I'm going to have $40,000 more in fuel, that's an inflationary pressure that we have. Facilities is going to have inflationary pressures. The other type of cost increase you might see is pre-planned operating increases. So I don't know of any right offhand, but I know in the past we've purchased new softwares and maintenance contracts kicked in that next year, you know, which could be like a $75,000 new expense that we hadn't had previously. So those were new operational increases that we would see. So if we have any of those coming up, the departments generally know about those by now. And we can plan for those in 2023. And then the third and final one I think you're going to see is you're going to see workload increases. So you're going to have the department heads talk to you about how many additional staff they think they need in order to accomplish the work as they're growing into it between now and through 2023. So as the county continues to grow and our service demand levels continue to grow, some departments are seeing that pressure, and you're going to hear about that from them. So that's what we're looking for, is just that delta, just the new items for 2023. And so I handed out a list, and I have it in the packet also. We're going to go through the departments, and it's just in a numerical order by their department numbers. And so the first one up is Circuit Court. So, all right. So come on up to the podium and tell us what you're seeing for Circuit Court, Rebecca.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Rebecca Rowan. I'm the newly appointed Register in Probate. I wanted you to know that we don't have any projected changes in the Circuit Court, and per Judge Needham, we continue to be fiscally responsible and work in good stewardship with the board and the citizens of the county. Thank you.
Nice job.
The last time you'll hear that speech.
All right, Christy, you're up next. Clerk of Courts.
Good morning. I'll start out with positive. I want to thank County Administrator Witt, as well as all the county board, for the multiple resolutions that affected my department in the past year. I know I said don't recap now, but getting the one additional staff member for this year, as well as the wage increases for our department, are huge in helping us not only recruit, but to retain our very dedicated and loyal staff. So thank you. Last year I did ask for 2 positions. I received 1, so my request will be again for 1 more additional staff member to help us with our caseloads and providing support to the courts. Thank you.
All right, they must have had some of my Costa Rica coffee this morning, too. Patty, medical examiner.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for all the support you've given the medical examiner's office. For us, the big thing that we're going to be asking for next year is the striker cot system, which is a mechanical cot and a lift system that is inside the van to help with lifting. It's a expenditure of $85,000, and we're looking to pay for it with the revenue that we bring in at the medical examiner's office. The average, we operate in a team of 1 when we go to and from the scene. The average weight that we take out of the cot and put into the cot, because 65% of our scenes are obese, ranges from 225 pounds to 660 pounds. So this will be a cost saver and a work safety issue. Thank you.
Susan, Justice Support Services.
So, new to this, and to keep myself from going off the rails and from Ken to awkwardly get me back on, I'll read with my notes I did prepare for you this morning, so bear with me. As a fledgling department, only 8 months old and really just up and running within the last 4 or 5 months, we had a less concrete idea of how 2022 budget would pan out forward, and are still working through as we go. Justice Services was created to provide an efficient, single entity that served an entire justice system, and with that in mind, we are making sure as we go to fulfill that design. I've been reviewing costs across all programs and potential defrayal areas for those costs, as well as potential reduction points that are possible through cross-department efficiencies and review of various practices that might benefit from an overhaul. For the 2023 budget, I've identified 3 primary areas across Justice Services that may be impacted. I'll try to outline those and provide justification for those costs. The first area is within purchase services, so more operational. When creating the 2022 budget, we tried to predict from the past what costs would be related to functions of the then DRC and the now new JSC. We narrowed it to just $75,000 and agreed to continue evaluation as the picture becomes clearer. Since that time and the new year, not only have our numbers doubled for assessments and sheer human referrals, but our costs have also doubled in line with costs rising everywhere across the country. For instance, just our UA sample cups have increased an entire $1 within the last month. 1 month of just a perspective of JSC costs are approximately $11,000. The JSC is currently covered Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., of which we do need to address in the future a mail-viewed collection, specimen collection. So more of a bona fide qualification requirement, doesn't need to be a staff person, but within that lab kind of unit, as well as potential Saturday morning lab draws to completely serve random screening for the entire county. So combined support to all the county programs and continuing the trends of inflation and referrals, I project a yearly amount within that line item of $140,000, or an increase of $65,000 over the original $75,000 budgeted. The next area, and I know that asking for a position is a stretch, but here I am just the same. Service delivery, so this would be for a department support position, an entire department. Service delivery demands have been increasing from the courts, the clerk of courts, the DA's office, jail releases, court assessing, etc. The program support position
will be similar to an HHS position that will support our entire department, providing single-source procurement and bill paying for the some 5 contracts we have, program fee collection across all programs, which is hundreds of participants, and tracking of those fees, which also defrays the costs for our program, operational focused program duties, assistance with grant tracking, and single-source justice system data collection for the presentation to this board, something that has been requested of me and my department since I arrived. I believe very strongly in data-driven decision-making within the justice system, and further, transparently providing information to the public. Through COVID and this current hiring market, I've learned how important cross-use and cross-training of staff is to fill resource gaps in the most efficient way possible across an entire department. The support person would be integral to the work across our entire department. The projected position cost would be $75,000. Finally, I'd be remiss in not kind of projecting forward based on the ARPA-funded positions. My department is currently supported by 2 ARPA positions. We do need to look ahead at some future costs with those 2 positions. These will be submitted for permanent positions when the ARPA funds have ended, so just kind of putting it out there. Without these 2 positions, the pretrial program that serves all 4 courts will have a single staff person, which is not tenable. Projected costs for those 2, $150,000. That is it. Any questions?
What is your total increase?
Oh, God. So 150,000 plus 75,000 plus 65,000.
I had 75 down twice. Didn't we start $45,000 when we created?
Which line item are we talking?
Well,
I'm
when
an,
we created the whole entire transfer. Am I correct? This is the transfer from the officer to now?
so if you think about my department, the JSC, which was the DRC, the Old Day Report Center, that can be considered like a unit. We still, as a county, need to provide those services. That's all the lab specimens, that's the GPS, that's the SCRAM, all the tracking, all the monitoring. Beyond that, there's a separate unit of pretrial case management that fulfills the court operations for all the assessing in the county, both pretrial and later on down the road in the system. So, you betcha. Anyone else? I'm sorry. JS, so Justice Support Center. So in the transition, we kind of changed the name from the Day Report Center to the Justice Support Center.
Carl, District Attorney's Office.
Good morning. So the big request for the DA's office is 2 new positions. One legal assistant, which I requested for the 2022 budget also, which wasn't granted. I think generally people recognize the need for it, but the money wasn't there. Just to summarize again, we haven't had a new legal assistant since 2004. Our criminal caseload has gone up 30% since then. I think actually we probably need 2 more legal assistants, but it doesn't really make sense to ask for another one until we have a bigger office. The other request is for another diversion position. We have 2.5 people in diversion, which a full-time caseload currently for someone in diversion is over 100 people. They're similar to probation agents. Probation agents are desperately asking for more people, and their caseload is already smaller than that. We also switched to be more in line with state standards, which requires more time for each person, so they have a big caseload plus more responsibilities per case now that we're more in line with the state standards. Our juvenile cases have gone up 70% since 2004. Those the juvenile cases come in and they stay for a long time. Those cases last for years. It used to be 1 legal assistant did part-time juvenile. Now we have basically 1.5 legal assistants doing just juvenile. So there's a huge need for additional legal assistants. I would probably ask for a moderate increase in training budgets. Our training budget hasn't changed much for attorneys in the last few years, and we have mandatory continuing education, that would probably be only a couple $1,000s. But the big one would be the 2 new positions, which was about $150,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. All right, Lisa, child support.
Good morning. Initially, I was going to say there is not going to be any expense changes except for, Ken pointed out, the Sheriff's Department mileage. So there might be a slight increase in expenses with the Sheriff's Department, cost of service, if they, and the mileage that they do. Also, their wages were increased a little bit, so there might be a tad bit expenses there, but otherwise, nothing else to report.
And to round out public protection, we have Sheriff Knudsen.
Good morning. You know, as Ken had mentioned, there's obviously a couple things that are affecting each and every department, but one is going to be fuel. That is going to be a cost increase. I think we were at, in 18, we were at 184,000. This year we're at 205,000 for 2022 that we had hopefully locked in prior to. Obviously things are going up quite a bit, so I have no idea where we're going to be at next year, but that is going to be an increase. Staffing issues. We've talked about staffing, but it is really our caseload and our workload. With the increasing demands as each one of our divisions and offices is getting from the public and calls for service, we have also asked for a number of years to increase our patrol staffing. So that's going to be a theme that we'll always try to keep out there. But as we're seeing our calls for service increase, calls that the dispatchers are getting, it's going to be one of the areas that we're going to focus on. With new staffing, and we have a number of new staff, is going to be that training budget. Just getting people up to new areas. We've got 3 new investigators this year. With those come some significant training opportunities with child forensics, homicide investigations, drug investigations, and then social media and the forensic downloads, forensic examinations, our forensic lab. All those trainings are probably going to push us maybe in the 10,000 range for additional training. You know, we've got 15 new jail staff over this last year. They all have to be jail certified, go to jail school. So that's going to be an increase in our training budget. When we talk about our forensic lab, those subscriptions for, now we're looking at something to extract evidence as a result of search warrants, extracting from the cloud. And that's another technological advance that we haven't had in the past, that in order for us to do thorough investigations of child pornography and some of these higher criminal offenses that we're taking deep dives, that's going to be an increase. I think it was 11,000 we looked at for that technology. Probably all of those are going to add up, but our big one is probably going to be our jail medical contract is up this year. We're putting that out for RFPs, and that could be in the 100,000 range. There's only about, I think we're putting out bids to 4, and those are probably 4 companies that are working in the upper Midwest. But we've seen some horrible news articles on out of Minnesota from jail medical mishaps. So that is going to drive up the price. Mental health is also, we have had included in our contracts was mental health over the last couple of years. We are looking at if that is still the direction to go in a jail medical contract, or if we go somewhere local. But all of that is going to have a ripple effect into other departments in the county if we try to stay local, so it may all be rolled into one. So that one, we are fearfully anticipating probably $100,000 range. So, I think patrol, Ken, we had talked in the past, it's $180 per deputy. So, we'll have some big ticket items. I know I'm kind of the doom and gloom all the time when I come up here of wants and needs, and there's a couple wants, and that's clearly some of the technology. But in the end, it might be a need for us to properly do our work, and we need manpower to do it, so. I know you appreciated all the other department heads ahead of me, so, thank you.
Don't run away yet, Sheriff. I have a question for you.
Oh, yes, sir.
So pretend, for instance, we didn't have a budget limitation. When you look at the hierarchy and the layout of your department staffing, what would be your ideal staffing level for the service demands that we have?
For our patrol unit,
Yeah, I'm looking primarily at the patrol unit because I know that's the division that has gone the longest without any new positions. So ideally, you know, where should we be at?
and you said no budget limit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
At least that's what I
theoretical.
heard.
It's theoretical, but
Theoretical.
yes.
You know, we recently went to 12-hour shifts. That has added one or two. You know, in the past, we had talked about our 8.5, 9-hour shifts, and we'd have minimum staffing of 4 deputies to cover the county. At most, we'd have 5, maybe 6. Now with this 12-hour shifts, we're at 7. But still, that's before any time off. We have several out on injuries right now. It'd be nice to add 2 a shift. And that's a total of 8, 2, 4, 6, 8 for our 12-hour shifts. But that only adds 2 more people. You know, I always throw out the example, when you drive by a crash and you see 4 county squads, that's it. That's it for the county. That's all we have out. And investigations, we are really strapped right now with some of these higher tech. I mean, we have somebody in just downloading phones and trying to analyze the data from that. It's one thing to dump a phone, as we call it, just dump it to get, but then you have, you know, on those horrible child porn cases, when you have tens of thousands of images, somebody has to sit and go through that. That's just not dump it, here you go. Someone's got to analyze all that stuff. And that takes a lot of time. And some of those higher trauma cases, we can't keep people in there for years. We have to keep training new ones. Because that's what ends careers. So investigations may be another one, but ideally it'd be nice to add at least 1, maybe 2 per shift on patrol. Thank you.
So before we move on from Supervisor Fiedler's standing committee report, he's here, public protection. Are there any questions on the public protection side of it? Okay, very good. All right, we'll move then into the administrative of offices. Corporation Counsel's up first.
Okay, well, no changes from this year's budget to next year's budget for the first 2 items regarding inflationary pressures or pre-planned operating expenses. We do have workload increases and would request a 3rd assistant corporation counsel attorney. No new attorney positions have been added since 2008, which is about 14 years. Case loads have increased in child support. We handle over 3,000 cases a year at a time that are open 4D cases. Guardianship cases were over 80 last year. We have had departmental requests for additional attorney time, specifically from Community Development Department and Children's Services to represent the department in CHIPS cases. Just as a comparison, Eau Claire County has 5 total attorneys in their office. We have 3, and our population is about 15,000 difference. I know this request may not happen next year. We don't have space for another attorney, but just so the board is aware that we will need another assistant corporation counsel in the near future. That's it.
Is this, if we get another attorney on staff, is that going to be offset by the savings of having to add contract attorneys then?
Not in the area of like our insurance company. They have attorneys that are represented in some specific case types, but there could be offsets if the Corporation Counsel Office takes over CHIPS cases, so Children in Need of Protective Services cases. Currently, the District Attorney's Office handles those cases, and there has been discussion with the Department of Health and Human Services of having the Corporation Counsel Office take over those cases for a couple of reasons. We do the termination of parental rights cases, and those flow from the CHIPS cases. In addition, our department represents the Department of Health and Human Services, and so there would be more consistency in the courtroom about recommendations. If we were to take over CHIPS cases, there would be reimbursement from the state. So how much time our staff, both legal assistant and attorney, handle or work on cases, do the cases in court, we would get reimbursed a certain percent from the state. I believe it's 30%, but don't quote me on that. In addition, that might see a cost savings in the district attorney's office if they don't have to handle those cases. I know they currently have a part-time contract position, I believe, that the county pays for, and maybe that won't be necessary anymore, so that could be some cost savings there.
So if you were going to guess, how does that wash out in terms of FTE? How much of that can you cover with those factors?
I'd probably say half is what I would guess.
Next up then, County Administrator Ken. Oh, thank you. I'll be performing all week, thank you. So nothing with Administration Committee or County Administrator's Office specifically. The other numbers that you see, though, under Administration are related to our different insurance pools that we have. So the County Administrator's Office administers the different insurance. So one of them is workers' comp. That one is pretty stable. We've had some good years, we've had some bad years, but overall they kind of average out. We haven't had any increases there, and I don't foresee an increase going into next year. We also have a liability insurance fund. So we self-insure for liability insurance up to $500,000 per claim. We've had a good track history there, but we reinsure for that over that $500,000 mark. And that reinsurance we've seen double-digit increases for each of the last 3 years. And so that trend is going to continue. What's driving that reinsurance market? Two things. One is cyber insurance, which went up 100% this year. And then the settlement costs related really to law enforcement issue related items. So we don't have any in St. Croix County, but other people that are in the insurance market do. So when there's a shooting in Racine and there's a lawsuit and there's a $10 million settlement, somebody is paying for that, and we all pay for it that are part of that insurance pool. And so that's why we're seeing that double-digit increase. All that money has to come from somewhere, and that's where it's coming from. So we will continue to see pressures on our insurance costs there. And then the last one was health insurance. So health insurance falls in there also. And health insurance is a benefit, and I work closely with HR on that. But health insurance, out of our $110 million budget is about $11 million. So we're seeing inflationary pressures of, anywhere from probably 8 to 10%, I would guess, for next year for health insurance. So if you have a 10% increase on an $11 million line item, there's $1.1 million in expenses. So that has to be absorbed and paid for somehow. And that's more than our net new construction number would be, just health insurance alone. So that's one of the big driving cost factors that we have. So nothing in administration, but those insurances you also have to keep track of. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll move next to HR. All right. Tara was working on some other things, but she did tell me that she would not have any new 2023 items that we had talked about. So we'll move to John next then with information technology.
You skip Cindy.
Cindy. Never mind, John. We're going to go back and pick up the county clerk. I didn't know she was still here.
I don't have a comeback for that, but my recommendation for the 4 budgets that I manage, the county clerk manages, there'll be no changes for the county board budget. It's based on the number of meetings, per diem, mileage. The county clerk, I can see only wages would be the increase in the budget. In 2023, there'll be 2 scheduled elections, so the election budget will go down. And then the other fund the county clerk manages is the dog license fund, which is an in and out account. So that's all I have.
All right, now we'll go to John. Thank you, Cindy.
Morning, everybody. We don't have any unexpected increases. The only increases we have are going to be inflationary due to supply chain constraints. We're seeing probably 15% increases in purchases for equipment right now. It's going to amount to $25,000, $30,000 for us. We're also seeing increases in our software support and licensing that we use for Microsoft and Oracle. We actually added a bunch of licensing this year for Oracle because we came under audit by them and we were apparently a little out of compliance. So we expect that to carry forward as we renew again next year. That's about $130,000 is what I'm expecting there. And then our maintenance contracts have been going up on our equipment too. So looking at about a total of about $150,000 to $200,000. That's about it.
I hope this is the right time to bring this up, and with Judy gone, I think somebody needs to be the, one with the difficult question, and I'm hoping to be more, poignant. I know that within the last week there was an internet outage, a service outage, and I know that it disrupted productivity across the whole system.
Correct.
Are you taking steps, do you need to increase your ask to prevent that from happening? Because the cost of productivity has to be taken into account when that happens.
Absolutely.
And I'm not holding you accountable.
No.
Not at all. It's not a gotcha question, but it is a deep concern.
Yep. So I do take responsibility for that because it was my team that was involved in that. They were reconfiguring a piece of network equipment. And when they reconfigured, there was a firewall, when they reconfigured one, it overwrote the other at the same time, and then they had to rebuild from scratch. And they had Cisco on the phone at the time they were doing it. And Cisco actually told them to run the command that they did. So I expect more out of my team, so I expect them to understand the implications of their actions. But we are putting in a measure right now without spending any money to provide failover in the event of an instance like that again. So it doesn't cost us any money for that. We are looking at other measures to protect the county from malware and ransomware, but we're hoping to offset those costs by replacing systems that exist right now, just getting to a more modernized system. So, but yeah, I appreciate the question.
So is it fair to say that it was a network outage and not an internet outage?
It was, correct. So
Okay.
we have 2 firewalls. They're resilient to each other. They were updating to, I don't know if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but there was a vulnerability called Log4j, came out about 6 weeks ago. We've been fighting this one we never got hit with it, but we've been remediating all our equipment that were affected by Log4j. Cisco came out with a new patch. We were trying to apply that patch. Thank you.
All right, next we have Leah, Finance.
Good morning. I do not anticipate any additional costs for the finance department for this year. We did get a new position last year, and so we are good for the upcoming 2023 year.
Thank you. All right, treasurer, is Denise here? All right, I don't see Denise. I don't think she had any significant changes other than sometimes banking fees are on the rise. Facilities, Jim.
Good morning. I realize at 65 I wasn't meant to still continue to go to concerts late at night, so, but it was a good one. Billie Eilish. Very good concert, very good concert. That's the upside of this. Yeah, it should be. So, in facilities, gas prices, gasoline, sheriff talks about how much he's going to be spending. This year, we're part of the Minnesota Consortium. So we're with a bunch of counties in Minnesota. We buy a contract for a year, and we price the gas. Last year, we were okay. Year before, we were a little bit higher than what you saw on the street, but right now, I'd buy gas here all day if I could. The price is $3.25 a gallon, and that's locked in for all of this year, so we're keeping costs down that way. Natural gas, we're paying about 68 cents a therm. Wisconsin, it's running about 97. So contract, we've got that contract extended till 24. We've done a lot to try to get out there in front of these price hikes, and hopefully we did a good job getting us locked into 24. Energy, Excel in their infinite wisdom, they're going to raise their prices. So we're going to be going up there about $11,000 next year, and that's on the electric side. And then on the gas, we're going to see about an $18,000 jump. So we're picking up some pretty hefty costs. Excel, the only thing we get from them is distribution charges. So all they have is the pipeline, and they run the valves to send us the gas that we're buying from somebody else, but the price is just exorbitant. So we're hoping that you do this solar project on the building next door, and that we can reduce the footprint. The electrical use in this building dramatically would be affected, and it would help the budget a lot. I know Ken's always looking to cut costs, and that's a good way to do it, although up front it's a little bit more. Price of consumables. Every time the sheriff goes out and arrests somebody, we put them in jail. They use more toilet paper and more paper towels. Well, that's going to go up about $5,000 this year. Anything that comes by truck, it's costing, you know. So it's not so bad. It's obviously we're going to need more next year for just doing what we do and servicing all the county and the people that come in and out of our buildings. But overall, it's pretty good as far as what we were looking at last year. So as far as employees, we're set. We can handle what we have right now. I think we do really well. The guys all have a good heart. They work well. Staff at the nursing home, we're holding out there quite well. The housekeeping staff there is phenomenal. So I think we're good there. Other than that, that's all I got.
Thank you, Jim. All right. Any questions on the administrative block? All right. We'll move on to Robbie, Highway Commissioner.
I only got 50 slides for you guys, so I'm teasing. So it was like, all right, I'm trying to get it into the reduced view right now. Yep, there we got it.
Chairman, Mr. Chair. Well, Robbie's got to ask Ken a question.
Ken, will there be an opportunity to ask about revenue at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a more general discussion once we're done with the department heads.
Thanks.
I'm going to cover revenue a little bit in mine too. So the first thing, the highway will not be requesting any additional staff moving forward for the next calendar year. We are still looking at efficiencies as part of, as part of our strategic plan to continue to provide efficient services for the county. Some of the challenges that we do have, and I'm not going to ask for a specific dollar value, just simply I want you to understand some of the challenges that the highway department is facing. As the county continues to grow, capacity So the first slide I show up here are 3 key intersections, and I apologize if you don't know them all. The first is and a good example is County Highway A and McCutcheon Road. So we're doing a safety enhancement project there in which we're installing a roundabout. These challenges tend to arise as we put more stress on the system, as communities grow, as we grow in different areas. A good example is right now the city of New Richmond has approximately 500 acres in preliminary plat. If all that housing market moves forward, we have to anticipate where we're going to have challenges. Probably number one complaint intersection I have right now is in A and McCutcheon. It's County Highway A and K, just west of New Richmond. So we're doing what's called an intersection control evaluation. We are very, very aggressive in seeking funding alternatives for these, but as we continue to grow, that's one of our biggest challenges. Next is going to be, I want to talk a little bit about inflation. I know it's going to be a common theme, but the top right, I showed you this last year. This is a typical project for us, and I'm going to nerd out for a second here. I've tracked this throughout my entire career. This is a typical what we call pulverize and relay job. Not a widen, not a reconstruct, but it's our bread and butter. It's what we're doing. We've already built a lot of our roads. They're wide, but we need to continue to meet that capacity gain. I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, I could have brought this slide up, and the materials in this gray part would have been about 50% of the project. Fast forward to now, it's about 75% of the project. We've done that by being more efficient. Our paving equipment is more efficient. Our crews are more efficient. We're actually less staffed now than we were 20 years ago. But all that, the pie can only change so much. So, example, we just received our hot mix asphalt bid. So our entire system, our entire county system, the surface is made of hot mix asphalt. We saw a 20% increase in material prices on Friday. That pressure, if you look down here, this is hot mix asphalt since 1997. It gives you an idea of the pressures we're facing. And this is the other slide where if I nerd out for a second, we talk about the mileage we're doing. We've been able to maintain a static operational budget, but that comes at a cost. As our inflationary increases outpace our revenue growth, we just do less mileage. That's what it comes down to. And this slide is the good indication. So the red is our paving mileage since 2016, and you've seen that inflationary index start to take a bite out of our projects. And the last, and if you've noticed, I put all our strategic goals in here. I tucked them in there. I tried to build them all in. So we're always looking at efficiencies. Maybe the bottom picture here is an efficiency, but I wanted you to see a picture of one of our quad axles that burnt up recently. But you look on the top, we're always investing in things that make our jobs safer, better, and more efficient. And these equipment can do that. It comes at a cost, but we're always looking for process improvements and ways to reduce our unit costs. But ultimately, we're still driven by the dollar. As material goes up, we're going to pave less. If our operational budget stays relatively static, we're just going to do less mileage. There is a tremendous opportunity right now. The federal infrastructure law that's out there that's going to bring about, you've heard a lot of misnomers, but really what it means for the state of Wisconsin is about $1 billion over the next 5 years. Now, we're not eligible for all those programs. That money is diversified within those programs, but we're eligible for a good chunk of it. And we're going to aggressively chase as much as we can. We've tried to position this county, the highway department, to be in a good position to do that. I believe we are, but it's still a competitive program. This isn't money they're going to hand you and say, hey, here's additional funding for maintenance. This is through what we call the Surface Transportation Program. This is through our HSIP, which is our Highway Safety Improvement Program. And those programs were going to be active. To give you an idea, one of the first round is going to be very tough. Our applications are due April 1. We have to deliver those projects by September 1. Now that's historically short time frame for a federal project. We're going to be very aggressive. We're looking at about 17 miles that we're looking to put in. We've already warned the staff that if we get these 3, summer's going to be hard. You know, I would hearken this back to 2010 when we took about 10 million through the R process in a very short time frame. But we're going to be aggressive. I want you to know as a county, we're looking at revenue opportunities. It's not always just the negative. I look at this as a potentially chance to reset, spend our money in places that make sense, and then divert some of our other operational funds. But ultimately, that pressure, that inflationary pressure, is eventually going to keep reducing our mileage that we do. Hopefully that wasn't too doom and gloom. We're doing really well. We have a great staff as a county, and we keep our costs low. But I just wanted a realistic picture for what the transportation system looks like in St. Croix.
Go ahead, Supervisor Hall.
Thank you, Administrator Witt. Just a real quick question for Robbie. Do we have sort of a general PACER rating for our surface conditions of our roads today in the county? And do we have any idea how that might be impacted by less maintenance work on them?
Certainly. So that's an index we track. I didn't include it with this. And for those that you aren't aware, we're required to, by law, rate our roads, 1 being completely failing, 10 being in new condition, on a biannual basis. We have to report that to the Department of Transportation. I track the metrics there. We're an aggressive maintenance county, and we do a good job, but we've been basically holding static, and you're starting to see those indicators go down. We're starting to see more mileage in the 4-5 range, 4-5-6, which is always it's an okay road, but it's trending towards deterioration. And once a road, the beauty of a bad road is it stays bad until you fix it. It doesn't get any better. So, but yes, we do have that metrics. I did not include it with the slides. And thank you for the Transportation Committee member asking the PACER rating. So I got to plug PACER.
So I've been doing this every other year, visiting my neighbors to talk about this obnoxious thing called elections. And I ran into this fella up on Grayton Road who, just an old codger, he says, you know, the city never got this right. They never got this road done. The potholes come back every year. But since the county bought that newfangled truck, what do they call that? And I said, chip sealer. Yep, this road is nice. I mean, it's nice. He says, tell whoever needs to hear it. I like it. Well, you got a fan. He says, I said, you know, I am your county board supervisor too, because I was running for city council. I said, I am your county board supervisor too. I approved that purchase. He says, well, yeah, that's a good thing. So, yeah, just we're getting our money's worth for the tax dollars. So,
yeah, and that's our truck mounted spray patcher unit that we do work for our partners, but it not only created us cost savings, but it's a safer unit. Putting our employees out on the road isn't as easy as it used to, and a walk-behind unit creates risk that the truck-mounted unit alleviates. Thank you.
All right. We will move into Health and Human Services. Bob.
Good morning. My daughter and wife also went to Billie Eilish last night. I'll be brief, but I do have a couple of asks. I'll just read from my notes here. Looking forward to 2023, HHS is projecting increased service delivery demands and staffing pressures in the areas of children and family services, behavioral health, and services to our seniors and persons with disabilities. The last 2 years of the pandemic have also exacerbated social and economic stressors in these areas that contribute to increased service demand. Purchase services related to child out-of-home placements and emergency detentions continue to negatively impact our budget. While HHS is taking actions to mitigate these costs through a focus on prevention, early intervention, and family-based models, the increase in demand and complexity of care needs are likely to continue into coming years. So I've identified staffing needs in 2 priority areas that would help us respond to current and anticipated service area demands. I'm asking for 1 new position in children's services. This would be 1 FTE program support specialist to assist with supervised family interactions. And the position costs for this would be partially offset by reducing a contract that we currently have with an outside provider who does this work. We think we can reduce our dependence on that contract and pay for at least part of this position with those savings. We also believe we can offset some of the cost with grant monies through the Targeted Safety Service funds that we receive. These are grant funds that we have gotten for the last 3 years and we anticipate getting going forward. There's no guarantee on that. But overall, we estimate that about a third of this position cost would involve tax levy, which would be roughly $40,000. And the other area that I see a significant demand for some expansion is in the ADRC, the Aging and Disabilities Resource Center. Here we're not looking for new positions, I'm just looking to increase the FTE percentage for some existing positions. The service area demands for our seniors and persons with disabilities have continued to increase commensurate with an aging population and pandemic stressors. We have about double the number of people receiving home-delivered meals now than in 2020. And while that might come down after the pandemic recedes, we still anticipate a lot of people will continue to get home-delivered meals. So in that area, the position would be the outreach coordinator, who is currently at a 0.48 FTE. It's 19 hours a week. And we would like to increase that to 24 hours a week, or 0.6. Another position is a nutrition manager who oversees all of the senior sites, 9 senior sites, and organizes the meals and the menus, and does a ton of work actually for 24 hours a week. We'd like to increase her from a 0.6 to a 0.8, 32 hours a week. That would include prorated benefits. And then the final position we'd like to increase is in the Adult Protective Services, which was moved under the ADRC this year. In that service area, there's a case manager at a 0.875 FTE. Kristen explained to me how this came to be a 0.875 FTE case manager position, and there was a long history of how pieces of positions were moved around. I won't go into that because I don't understand it. But I'd like to increase that to 1 FTE for Adult Protective Services. And again, all of these areas, and we're seeing significantly increased demand, and we just don't have the staff time to respond to them. All said and done, the FTE increases would total about $8,000. So if we can find other ways to pay for it, we will, but right now it looks like that would come out of tax levy. In our behavioral health division, there's also significant pressures, but I think we can manage that into next year with ARPA funding, with other grant funding, and with some other initiatives that we're looking at. So I'm not anticipating that we'll need increased staffing yet. We have to fill some vacant positions and things like that. So the total anticipated increased tax levy spending related to the new position in children's services and the increased FTE percentages in the ADRC would total somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000. And I'll take any questions you might have. No?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Healthcare campus. So the healthcare campus is, managed off of the tax levy. So they cover all of their operational costs. So even if they did have some changes they were looking at, I don't believe they have any significant changes, they'd be covered under their revenues. So I think that's the sum of the healthcare campus, Bob. Yeah. Veteran Services, Phil.
Good morning. I do not see any operational charges or changes that are going to be coming up. I do see a retirement potentially in the next year or thereabouts. So as far as staffing, we might look at a reclassification, but not an elimination. That's it.
Is your van running?
Yes.
Okay.
It's running. It's running well. We got her up. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. All right. That was Health and Human Services. We'll move into the last standing committee block then of community development. So Beth is up first with the Register of Deeds.
Well, as always, I'm here to tell you we just do our job, do it well. Probably don't need to hear about my $50 worth of additional mileage and gas. We are fully staffed. That's our goal, is to stay fully staffed. The thing that we would bring to the table would be less revenue potentially. The sales continue to be strong. The Property Records Industry Association had said that it has probably climbed about 18% over the year, and we've seen that as a county with the additional recordings, with both deeds and mortgages. The problem remains that the inventory out there is very small. There's not a lot of property for sale. So what you'll see from our department will probably be slightly less revenue. They feel that there will be an effect of the Russia-Ukraine war. They're not sure what that will be at a local level within small counties like us in the United States, but they feel that there might be a slight effect. Trending downward, so we expect to meet our revenue this year. Our expectations were right on forecast, but then next year, 2023, I would anticipate less recordings. We all know that the Federal Reserve might increase interest rates today even, so that might decrease the refinances. But there's still the young homeowners that are trying to get into something, and subdivisions are still strong, so what do I know? Anything else? That's all we got. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Beth. All right, Ellen, Community Development.
Good morning. So we have a few things. Last year I asked for 2 additional positions. I'm asking for that again. We have expanded our parks facilities, and we are operating them, in my opinion, extremely well. Our parks revenues were up this year again. They were up in 2020, and they set a record at $400,000, and didn't quite think that that could be happening again because it was greatly due to COVID. But this past year, 2021, we actually set another new record. We went up. We were still at $400,000, and we went up by an extra $200,000 from what we'd done the previous year. So that of course means that there are more people at the parks, which increase all of our costs and increases how much work the staff have to do to keep up and stay ahead. Last year we compensated for a missing person with increased seasonal costs, and it all balanced out. But we do need that full-time person. Seasonal costs also, we had to go up last year, and we're going up again this year, but we budgeted for it. Next year I imagine we might have to go up again if inflationary costs continue. Staffing, the cost of staffing and how much we have to pay to recruit people is just going up. And we've heard this from other departments, but we're facing it very strongly also. I'm still looking at trying to fill open positions. I fill one and someone else leaves. I fill another and someone else leaves. It seems to be constant, and they're all leaving for very good jobs that are paying more, and we're not able to match that. So that's my frustration. I'm looking for another parks property manager again. We have added new parks. We have seen extensive increased attendance. We are balancing that. We are also seeing other costs go up, for instance, the potty pumping costs and the electricity and other costs, things like that, which are good because we're more than covering those with our increased revenue. If you're wondering what is the net increase, the net increase is about on our revenue from what we budgeted was up about $200,000. So the other position is, this goes back to the strategic plan, wanting to expand law enforcement of land use ordinances. I asked for the position last year. I've tried to pick a position that's sort of a midway position, someone who can be at a lower cost without being, and still be able to do the work. And so I would like to add another person in the land use division to do enforcement and administration in our ordinances. As far as, we are not able to hire very many people with very much experience. Our salaries don't allow us to do that. So what happens is we have a gap, and I'm sure this is true for most of the departments here. It takes time to train people on how to do these things, and it's not an easy job to do. It's very stressful, and land use administration and enforcement is. So we're just seeing that gap. To some extent, it feels like we need more staff just to continue to cover the turnover. That's a factor in everything we deal with. A couple other important things to tell you as far as our budget.
Last year, I also asked for some additional funding so we could keep our water quality initiatives going and trying to improve water quality and implement the priorities that were identified by the Water Quality Study Group. It's been a priority in the state, and it's been a priority for this county, and it is part of our strategic plan. Last year, I didn't have a real firm number. I said somewhere between 30 and 50,000. We've worked really hard to refine that, to figure out exactly what we need. We wanted 25,000. Cut it way in half, but we really need this to continue to do the baseline testing that we've talked about to meet the strategic goal, one of which was to do an additional 25 tests a year. That can't happen. Another strategic statement was goal was to do bacteria testing. Again, those things take time, take money, and we need that additional funding to do that. It's not a huge amount, but we'd really like to have it put into the budget consistently. Right now, we're operating with about $10,000 and one staff person full-time, in addition to other staff supporting it. One other thing I would point out is some of the areas that are going up that impact us quite a bit is in our recycling and household hazardous waste collection. Last 2 years, partially due to COVID, we reduced to a single household hazardous waste collection, but also very much due to the rising cost. We've made a lot of strategic efforts, and we have reduced that cost. For one thing, we're charging a lot, more than we ever did before, and for the household hazardous waste. Have some unhappy customers, but also we are able to cover the cost without having huge increases in the budget. From last year to this year, we went up by over about $15,000. Thank you very much for supporting that. We really appreciate it. I don't know, but I will say it's very possible the disposal costs will continue to rise. We are working closely with the new business in Somerset, and in fact, they are going to be the vendor for this year's program. And we hope that we can continue to keep that cost down, but I'm just saying the rising disposal costs are a problem. Another area, we have all these programs that we try to do at cost so that there's no actual cost to the county, it's just a pass-through cost. For instance, our tire collection and our appliance collection. We are reducing the tire collection this year by one site, and next year we may have to reduce it more, maybe go to just once a year instead of twice. Unless we get a little more assistance, we've raised prices on the tire disposal, and we've also most of the reason we cut that one location was to not have to raise prices even more in order to reduce the mobilization costs. Again, inflation and the cost of staffing. So we aren't asking for any money for those, but I think you should know that our programs are going to be reduced because of that. So those are my main elements, if there's any questions. Okay. Oh, excuse me.
Did you mention the estimated cost of these two positions, or did I miss that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have all that. I have, with the increase in, I'll give you that, I'm thinking for the parks property person, full-time, about 90,000, the code enforcement person, about 85,000, and I did also look at how, we don't have the exact numbers yet, but I do know that other suggestions in the strategic plan was to hire outside assistants and go through some other routes. I don't know what that would cost, but I can't imagine that would cost that much less, especially if you're hiring outside labor to do the same work. So I think it might be a wash. I don't know for sure. The water quality initiatives, I mentioned 25,000, and I don't have any additional costs identified specifically. I'm just making you aware of changes in the recycling and hazardous waste program. So about $200,000.
I'll make comments as the chairman of the committee now, and then we'll flesh it out in our conversation. I'm not sure how this develops later. But in terms of justifying the expenses, I watch this department pretty closely, and these positions are pretty stressful. This is a department that is responsible for writing and maintaining and enforcing most of our ordinances. When we're talking about code enforcement, that's a stressful and diplomatic position, and it's very important to have somebody who's capable in that position. And the other positions, park managers, we're growing. I know it sounds trivial when you're thinking about the large scope of services offered by the county and trying to be fiscally responsible, but Bill Rubin has mentioned, and I'm sure that he'll back me up on this, that having good destination parks is an engine of economic development. And I would like to maintain that in the mix as we're considering the things that we want to make priorities. And this is going to be a time of pencil sharpening and making sure that we're doing the right thing. But let's please not trivialize the needs of community development here. So we'll have conversations about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. The next ones on here are other organizations that we support that are helping to support the mission. The library is actually a statutory requirement that we're required to support the libraries by 70% of the rural circulation. I think the important part of the discussion on libraries, though, is really with the Hudson Joint Library, because we had gotten really close to an agreement last fall about a new method of providing support to the Hudson Joint Library, which would dramatically increase the library levy. That increase in the library levy is only applied against those municipalities that make up that joint library. So everyone else in the county doesn't have to panic that their tax rate's going up because of that. But it is a significant change. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar decision that the county board is going to have to make. So I just don't want to have it drop off the radar. And I think make sure we bring it up and we talk about it really right after the election so we can start educating the elected officials about what that is and what it entails so they can make an informed decision before the budget is finalized. I don't know if there's any more on library that you want to talk about, but that's the big issue. Okay. Yes. UW Extension, I talked to Kristen Bruder. She didn't have any significant changes that she was anticipating for UW Extension. So we move on from that. And again, the County Fair and Economic Development, those are outside organizations that we support. So we'll see what they have coming forward with their budget request later in the year. But I don't anticipate any significant increases from either one of them.
I know that the office situation is changing for economic development. I want to just say, we're going to continue to support them in terms of logistics, though. Is that right? With they'll still have the privilege of coming in and using the postage meter and et cetera. They'll have access to our.
I don't believe that's been determined yet.
Okay, I was hoping that we'll talk about that later. Yep. All right.
So that is the. Let me jump back to the agenda here then. So that is the departments. So you've heard from all the departments. So what happens from this point is you don't have to make the budgetary decisions right now about who's going to get new positions, who's going to get increases. But I think it's good to hear what all of those issues are. You charge the county administrator with figuring it out, really, at this point. But what's helpful is to provide guidance to the county administrator about where you see the priorities. So what are the priority issues that you see after listening to these department heads? And I put together a decision matrix so you could understand how you rank the priorities, how I'm going to interpret them, and what I'm going to do with the budget because of them. So if we look at the different priorities that you would set for me, on the left column, the first one would be the structural deficit. So we typically don't have a structural deficit, but due to a couple of things that we've done last year and this year, we do have one going into 2023. That structural deficit was created, one, by the Sheriff's Department union contract. The way that we structured that created a $375,000 structural deficit. We had funded part of the union contract settlement agreement with ARPA dollars. Structural deficit going into next year, though, $375,000. The other things that we've done is recently the county board has approved a 1% COLA adjustment to the wage grid. That creates a $300,000 structural deficit going into the next year. We also approved some compression step increases for several different departments and really across the board for employees. Those create about $150,000 of structural deficit going into the next year. So all of those changes we have to make sure we account for. So we have about $700,000 to $800,000 of expenses in 2023 that are not on our 2022 books. So we have to account for that. Really, first and foremost, I always think structural deficit should be first. There are some ways, I list it, you could put it as the number one priority, you could put it as number two priority. We could use cash reserves, we could use ARPA dollars to push that down the road. But eventually, any structural deficit does have to be addressed. So that's structural deficit, that's number one. Two that I have on the list here is employee compensation. I listed out if you want to rank it 1, 2, 3, or 4. It was ranked number 2 last year. At a number 2, it's a step increase or it's a COLA adjustment. We probably would not be able to afford both of them. And the different levels then depending on where you place it. I have it higher on the list as a starting point, really because I see the inflation in the marketplace, and when our employees are leaving, they're saying they're leaving because of compensation issues. So if we don't stay competitive, we're going to have continued turnover. That turnover has a cost to the county above and beyond the dollar cost of those positions. So trying to stay competitive is one of the priorities that I have on here as a starting point and something for you to consider. Third on the list, I listed health insurance. It was number 1 last year. I've pulled it down on the list. I talked to you about that health insurance inflationary factor, anywhere from 8 to 10% potentially, $1 million number. We can do things to reduce or offset that cost. We can adjust the plan design. We can increase the amount of the employee contribution. The reason I think we can do some of those things is when the employees are leaving, none of the employees are saying they're leaving because they don't like our benefits. We have great benefits, but it's a give and take. I can't give great wages and give great benefits. I have a limited number of dollars to use. So we do have to make a decision, and there might be a little bit of give and take there to offset those different costs. New positions I have 4th on the list. Last year is 3rd on the list. Whether it's 3rd, 4th, or if you want to classify it somewhere else, really means almost no new positions. The structural deficit, wages, health insurance, you're going to have some increase there. You know, I understand the departments are trying to get the work done. They have a lot of pressure with the position requests that they have. The sheriff, ideally, we'd give them 8 new positions. It's just not feasible to do. And I think at this point, I would really look at it from a 2-year perspective, and there's a couple reasons why. I would prioritize compensation in the first year in 2023 because of inflationary pressures, and I would push positions back, but you know, sort of say that in 2024 we are going to change that. We're going to flip that, and we're going to make positions a number 1 priority. So additional help is coming. It's going to happen. We just need to delay it a little. And part of the reason for that is with the government center expansion project, we won't have new office space until at least 2024. So you could add a whole bunch of positions in 2023, and I don't have anywhere to put them. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money finding temporary spaces for them, and then I'm going to tear all that out the next year as we complete the remodeling. So that's part of the reason why a 1-year delay makes sense for some of the position requests that we have. And then finally on the list, we have operating expenses. The operating expenses, you can prioritize it last. It really doesn't change the fact that fuel is going to be more expensive and we're going to pay more for fuel. And so we will have to adjust the budget in those areas where we have to. We will make the department heads prioritize, though, to try to stay as close as possible on their total operating expenses and cut where they can. But that's pretty thin right now as it is. You've heard some of the departments talked about training dollars. We've attacked training dollars over the past few years to afford other things. And now they're realizing, well, I don't have enough now to complete the training that I really want to complete. So that's the negative effect when you do that. So these are all of the issues that I've identified for you, the prioritization, and how you prioritize things will help me in assembling a balanced budget to present to you in the fall. I'm going to turn it over for your discussion here in just a sec. But the process from here, because I know that there's an election here in a couple of weeks and some of the faces are going to change, I think this is a good discussion to have, and I really like that there are some members in the audience here that I know are hoping to be on the county board. So it's helpful to hear all of this right now. The time for the priority list would be at the May county board meeting. So it's going to come up fast after the elections. It'll be the first county board meeting, regular county board meeting after the elections. Hopefully we can squeeze in an administration committee meeting after the organizational meeting. The new administration committees met to give a recommendation. But your feedback here, you know, even if you're not rerunning for office or even if you don't get reelected, you're still representing constituents, and it'd be good to hear what you think about these different issues. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Comments? Who was, Dan, go ahead then.
If nobody minds, I'll start out. I've given this a great deal of thought, and I'd like to just start it out by seeding the fertile soil of your ideas. The cost of turnover is really high for some subtle reasons. It's obvious that we have to do training, and it's obvious that there's productivity lost, but there's also the increased cost of offering more money for the replacement. So if a person's leaving a department and we can't offer them more money to stay, we're going to end up offering that amount of money to the person that they're replaced with. And that's a subtle change, but that's also something that we need to take into account. That's the first thing. Now, the second subject that I want to talk about is benefit concerns, and I've been thinking about this for probably 3 years, and it's kind of bothered me. Not bothered me, but it's someplace where I think we can shift a benefit at not a savings. We're not going to save money, but I think we can shift a benefit, and it's going to be some real friction, and it might be radical, but there's a program, a very well-entrenched program, which is a benefit where there's a long-term sick leave bank. A person who retires from the county after age 50, I think is the rule, or 55, can take their long-term sick leave, which is PTO that's been accrued and saved. And we have a lot of money that needs to be accrued in the county it's just saved. And then when a person retires, they get a big old lump of money from that long-term sick leave. I think we need to task our administration committee with taking a very hard look at that, shifting, and it can't be done. You can't just take it from people who have been promised this money. I mean, that's grandfathered in, but they can change the policy moving forward and then shift some of that benefit, not all of it. You know, discuss what's fair. This isn't taking benefits away, it's shifting benefits, shifting the cost of benefits from long-term PTO. Let people keep their PTO, what they get that they can use during the course of a year. Don't take that away. In fact, I think we should insist that they take vacation for their own mental health. But this long-term banked sick leave, people are going to need to bank some sick leave in case they have, and that's what it's for, a need during the course of a year to take a long or midterm time off. But this idea of keeping it then and accruing and accruing and accruing so that when they retire at 55 they get tens of thousands of dollars extra, that bonus isn't necessarily what it's, you know, I would think intended for. And if we could shift that into health care, it may be a good idea. So I know that everybody's going to want to have something to say, but that's one opportunity, I think, where we could, over the course of time, shift money back into another benefit that's sorely needed, that's going up in cost, and it could be a good solution.
On the matrix, the structural deficit is sitting at the top right now. Administrator Witt, you made some comments about some of the options related to that, including county reserves and ARPA funds. Can you talk about the current and long-term impact on overall financial management for the county as we consider possibly those alternatives as we look at this list of priorities? Maybe it's conversation for later, but I just think, it's important for us to understand what that might mean if we would look at those options as part of our analysis.
Yeah, let me take a step back and sort of talk about revenue overall maybe. So a third of our revenues come from the tax levy. We collect about $10 million a year in sales tax, so about 10% of our revenues are from sales tax. The rest of our revenues are all coming from charges for services, which are like the nursing home and some of the HHS programs. And then we have grant programs that cover 25 to 30% of our programs also. A lot of state programs into HHS are covering those. And we do break down by different divisions in the budget if you look, how much is covered by different sections. Highways probably a good one that's a third, a third, a third. HHS is heavier on charges for services and grants, whereas like the Sheriff's Department is like 97% tax levy. So they're all funded in different ratios. So when we look at revenues overall though for the county, the only ones that we have any control over, and it's only a marginal control, is the tax levy. So only a third of our revenue source is adjustable. And then that is limited by the net new construction number for the county. So that's a very small number. So if we're collecting $30 million and we can go up 2%, which would be a nice healthy net new construction number, that's $600,000. So that's it on the revenue side. We do have continued strong sales growth. We've been increasing that by about $500,000 a year. We've had really good growth over the last 2 years. I'm inclined to go higher next year, which I think will help offset some of that structural deficit that we have. But then when we get to more specific to your question, what are the other options with financial management of the county? We have a practice right now, whenever we end in the black, and we end with a fund balance, we take that additional money, we look at what our fund balance requirement is. We have a target of 35% plus or minus 3. If we're over then 38%, we take that extra money and we move it over to the KIP. That's really beneficial for the county in the long run because we're avoiding borrowing costs. We're avoiding having to go out and borrow money to maintain the infrastructure of the county by doing that. So that's a system that we've created here. It works really well. But what it doesn't allow you to do is to say, well, I want to use fund balance then to stretch out that structural deficit. So that's one part of it. I don't recommend using fund balance to cover structural deficits. We have a purpose for our fund balance, and that's to avoid future debt. Big savings for the taxpayer in the long run. ARPA dollars is a potential, though. We have about $7.5 million of money that's unallocated of ARPA dollars. And so how we use that, we do have quite a bit of flexibility over. So if you wanted to stretch that, $700,000 to $800,000 of structural deficit into 2 years by, taking half of it, $400,000, we're going to apply $400,000 of ARPA, we're going to split it over 2 years. That is a possibility. And that would be a policy decision that's available to the county board. I'm not opposed to that. I think there's a lot of competing demands, though, for those ARPA dollars. And that's going to have to be a priority decision by the county board if that's what you want to do.
Supervisor Long?
A couple quick comments. First of all, I think it's really important for us to recognize that although this budget season is going to be particularly challenging, I think we should feel very grateful that we're actually in a solid financial position to begin with. And we need to be grateful for our finances for the last couple of years to put us in that position so that that will better enable us to meet the challenges in the next probably couple of years. And the only other comment I want to make is that I think that we need to start becoming a little more comfortable with the possibility of making adjustments in the health insurance. And I know we talked about a lot about that last year, and we didn't want to do it. We didn't make any changes. But because of some of the challenges that we're facing, I think that we're going to need to seriously consider that, and the sooner that we start becoming a little more comfortable with that discussion, I think the better off we're going to be.
Any other comments? Oh, Tim?
Thank you. So I guess I would echo Mr. Long's comments on taking a look at health insurance. I think, unfortunately, we are in a position where, the driver for our budgets are going to be inflationary. And that's going to put tremendous strain on us as policymakers to look for and make the hard choices that we're going to have to make to keep our financial structure in place as we go forward. The last thing I want to do is continue to spend as if, we were 2 years ago. Conditions have changed. I'm still somewhat nervous about how the economy will recover coming out of the pandemic. And I'm assuming that we're going to be looking at wage pressure, gas price pressure has been talked about all day today. I don't want to have to shift that burden onto taxpayers who will also be facing inflationary pressures as well in their consumer purchases. So it's going to be our job to really have very, very sharp pencils as we look at going forward what we need to have versus what would be nice to have, and only focus on making sure that we're hitting the priorities that touch most people's lives most dearly. And that's going to be public safety, it's going to be health and human services, and it's going to be general infrastructure.
Any other comments? Supervisor Hanson?
I'm going to come back to my original comments that we need to consider a way to look at our entire benefits mix. And I think we may be stepping over dollars to save dimes if we if we cut into the health mix, the health insurance mix, because as we're talking about on one hand, recruitment and retention, and then on the other hand, we're talking about healthcare. We cut healthcare, we are going to hurt the recruitment and retention side of this equation. It's a balance, it's a scale. And if we start taking weights off of one side, it's going to become imbalanced. So I agree with you, Bob, in 100% that it needs to be discussed. But we're putting a lot of money into benefits, and what I've suggested, I'm going to ask you to look into with an open mind, because I do have a little experience with that and peek at it, because there's an opportunity there, I believe. And hurting that benefit will hurt retention and recruitment, and unfortunately it's going to take probably a 24-month cycle to bear out my prediction, and I hate being right on things like that.
Any other comments? Sure.
Administrator Witt, is there any of the ARPA dollars that are still available to us available to be spent on what we were just talking about as far as the health care for employees?
So yes, is the easy answer to that. It gets a little bit more complicated. So we, at the last county board meeting, we approved claiming the $10 million of lost revenue. So once we've done that, that frees that last $7.5 million that we haven't allocated to a specific project for anything that's really viable. You can't reduce debt, you can't reduce the tax levy, and you can't put it into a rainy day fund. So health insurance, yes, is available for that. Now the only caveat is when you use ARPA dollars, it's a one-time money. Once I've spent the money out of the savings account, it's not there anymore. So that's how structural deficits the following year get created. So yes, it can, but we want to be very careful how we're using it so that we don't create a bigger problem the following year.
And we also have to use it by a specific time period? We couldn't use it for 3 or 4 years forward on the health care?
Through it has to be incurred by the end of 2024. and expended by the end of 2026. Yep, but incurred, so that's, you know, I think we'd have to take a close look at what the definition of incurred is, if you were talking specifically about like health insurance and stuff.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Ken, you kind of got your marching orders?
Well, not exactly, but I think it's going to be at the May County Board when we have, you know, the final discussion, and again, probably an admin meeting at the end of April, where the committee will make a recommendation to the county board. So you'll have an opportunity to discuss further and offer a change. But I guess whoever ends up on the administration committee, really be thinking about it, because you're going to have to put together your proposal of what you think should be on that priority list.
Okay, we'll move on to our agenda. Request for future agenda items. Anybody have anything? Announcements and correspondence. Go ahead, Supervisor Hanson.
Anybody wants to have a really good time and you're not doing anything tomorrow afternoon, come on to New Richmond for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. New Richmond, it's a place to have fun.
What time is that at, Dan?
Yeah.
It's at 4 o'clock, and if you wanted to support me in my effort to run for city council, you could help me hand out potatoes and cabbages, because that's what we do.
Any other announcements? Nope. So at 10:01, I rule us adjourned, and date of next meeting will be determined. Yep. Thank you, everybody.